The city of Chicago has 77 neighborhoods. Most of these neighborhoods are relatively peaceful, but there are a few that are not. In fact, some of these neighborhoods are in a state of constant war. Over the past 4 years, I have witnessed and filmed the aftermath of the extreme violence taking place across the city. What you are now about to see are the top 10 most violent neighborhoods in Chicago.
Street in black jackets and black hoodies, says they were staying on the corner and doing the shooting.
The Grand Crossing neighborhood is about 8 miles south of the Loop. The area was settled by real estate developer Paul Cornell in 1853 and annexed by the city of Chicago in 1889. The early ethnic makeup of the neighborhood was English, Irish, and Scottish immigrants that worked for the railroads. Early immigrants settled in the area known as Cornell. The name of the town was later changed to Grand Crossing. The name Grand Crossing comes from an 1853 right-of-way fight between 3 railroad companies that ended in a train crash that killed 18 people. After this horrific accident, a bridge was built. But before the bridge, the congested crossing where the accident happened was the most dangerous railroad crossing in the world. The Grand Crossing neighborhood clearly has a racist past. In 1905, an amusement park was built at 63rd and King Drive. The park was named White City. Blacks were not allowed to enjoy the park, but were allowed on the property for only one reason. White City Park offered many forms of entertainment, like the first water ride in history. The park also had a game called the African Dip. It was a game where whites would pay to throw objects at the head of a black man. The game was extremely racist and highly inhumane, but was seen by some as entertainment. White City Park closed in 1933 due to the Great Depression. In the 1930s, German, Swedish, and Italian immigrants, along with blacks, began flooding into the neighborhood. Blacks were looking for an escape from the urban black ghettos. They sought a better middle-class lifestyle in Grand Crossing. There was massive opposition from white residents to keep blacks out. To achieve this goal, whites used racial zoning laws to stop the flood of blacks from entering the neighborhood. Blacks fought this racial injustice all the way to the Supreme Court. In 1948, restrictive racial contracts were ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. This opened the door, allowing more blacks to move into the Grand Crossing neighborhood. After the Supreme Court ruling, 80% of all whites fled the neighborhood. In the 1930s, blacks were just 6% of the population. By 1960, it rose to 86%. The takeover of Grand Crossing completed the Black Belt that extended down State Street and ended in the Grand Crossing neighborhood. In the early 1950s, the Parkway Gardens public housing project was built on the exact same spot where White City Park once stood, at 63rd and King Drive. I can't believe building a public housing complex on this piece of land wasn't seen as a direct insult by Chicago's political leadership towards blacks. One of Chicago's oldest cemeteries is Oakwoods. It was established on February 12, 1853, and it sits on 183 acres of land. It has the largest mass grave of Confederate prisoners of war in the Western Hemisphere. Over the past 4 decades, this cemetery has become the final resting place for South Side shooting victims of Chicago's gang wars. In the 1960s, blacks had become the racial majority in the Grand Crossing neighborhood. In 1970, everything changed, and not for the better, when black street gangs from other neighborhoods moved in and took over the neighborhood. These are some of the gangs: Black P-Stones, Black Disciples, Gangster Disciples, Along with these gangs came the drugs, guns, and extreme violence. And over the next decade, the community fell into a downward spiral. In the mid-1970s, the area surrounding the Parkway Gardens projects became extremely violent. And the CHA, the Chicago Housing Authority, began neglecting the deteriorating buildings. Because gangs took control of the projects, and that made repairs to the buildings next to impossible, because it had become so dangerous for CHA workers. In the 1980s, a split occurred in Larry Hoover's Black Gangster Disciple Nation. George Booney Black Davis broke off with many others and formed the Black Gangsters. The gang's name was later changed to the New Breeds. In the 1990s, the New Breeds allied with West Side gangs and made the move south and set their sights on the greater Grand Crossing neighborhoods. These are some of the gangs that moved in: New Breeds, Black Souls, Vice Lords. All they brought was more gang violence to the South Side. This war would rage on for over a decade and cost many lives. In 2010, the city of Chicago finally renovated the dilapidated Parkway Gardens projects. Every one of Chicago's top 10 most violent neighborhoods have their share of high-profile shootings. In 2014, in the Grand Crossing neighborhood, one of 4 members of the Gangster Disciples shot and killed 9-year-old Antonio Smith Jr. because they thought he shouted a warning to rival gangbangers. All 4 of these grown men were arrested and charged with the murder of this 9-year-old child. Not every killing ends with a bullet. In this case, a mother gave her 13-year-old daughter a switchblade to use in a fight. DeKayla Dansbury, age 15, was stabbed to death within the Parkway Gardens projects. Her mother was charged with murder. The 13-year-old girl is still unidentified due to her age. In 2016, a stray bullet killed Nakia Aldridge. She was the 32-year-old cousin of Chicago Bulls star Dwayne Wade. She was shot in the head while pushing her infant daughter in a baby stroller. It was in fact a stray bullet fired by rival gang members near the complex that killed Nakia. The shooters were brothers. Both were captured and charged with murder. This is the same story over and over in Chicago. 4 more children are now motherless because of gang violence. In 2017, 11-year-old Takia Holmes was shot in the head while driving with her mother, her aunt, and her 3-year-old brother in a van. Takia was on life support for several days, then died from her wound. This shooting stemmed from 3 gang rivals selling pot in Black Disciples territory in the Parkway Gardens projects. Gang member Antoine Jones went and grabbed a gun, fired shots at the 3, missed them, and struck Takia Holmes. Jones was arrested and charged with the murder. Takia was one of 3 children shot in Chicago over a 3-day period in February of 2017. The sad part of all this madness is the deaths of innocent children that seem to happen quite frequently on the bloody streets of Chicago. The present overall economic picture in Grand Crossing has gotten better in small pockets of the community, but most of the area is still economically depressed. The population of the area is 97% black, 1% Hispanic, and 0.5% white. The population presently stands at 32,000. This neighborhood has seen a steady decline in population over the past decade. The real problem in the Grand Crossing neighborhood is the Parkway Gardens projects. Grand Crossing also has something none of the other top 10 most violent neighborhoods have. Chicago's most violent city block, O Block, is located at 64th and King Drive. This street runs alongside the Parkway Gardens projects. From 2011 to 2014, 19 people were shot on O Block. It is truly the most blood-soaked street in Chicago. And O Block was home to a young former First Lady, Michelle Obama. Most young men in these neighborhoods revere gang leaders like Fluky Stokes, Jeff Fort, Larry Hoover, Willie Lloyd, Gregory Bowlegs Chester, and Paris Poe. These men are solely responsible for 4 decades of pain and suffering inflicted on neighborhoods like Grand Crossing. I believe there is still hope for the Grand Crossing neighborhood because of strong opposition to the gangs and violence by Pastor Corey Brooks and his organization, Project Hood. So far this year in the Grand Crossing neighborhood, 110 people have been shot, 15 have been killed, and 95 have been wounded. These stats rank Grand Crossing at number 9 on the 2017 list of the most violent neighborhoods in Chicago. What you are about to see is a mass shooting where 2 brothers were killed and 5 were wounded on Christmas Day 2016 in the neighboring community of Chatham.
Okay, 632, we just getting it on the board. Shots fired, 86 in Maryland, 86 in Maryland, 15 gunshots heard. We got 86 in Maryland, so far no shooter information. 3 tickets on that. We also getting shots fired at 77 in Calumet, 77 in Calumet. Hey, 632, 86 in Maryland in the alley, 4 to 5 shots. We still getting tickets of shots fired, guys. Units at 6 and City Line, we got 3 people shot at 8649 Maryland, 8649 Maryland, 3 people shot on the porch. Zone 8 station clear.
Watch you, can we get in? Yeah, look over here, we got 2 people shot.
632 is over there. 2 people shot? Okay. They already coming. We're going to 8649. Is that where you are?
10-4.
Okay, guys, we need some crowd control. They say everyone is hysterical over there at 86 in Maryland for one of the tickets. How's everything, 32?
There's 5 people shot.
We got 5 people shot. 5 people shot. Okay, 632, 612, could you tell us anything about the shooters?
Can we get, we got 5 people shot over here. Can we get more ambulance service?
Okay, we're going to call an action for more ambulance over there. 605, I'm going to need you over there. Okay, we need a couple 4511 units at 8649 Maryland. We got 5 people shot there. For 612, 5 people shot.
12, can you do me a favor? No more police trying to block the street. We need room for the ambulance to come in.
Hey guys, all the squad cars that are going to Maryland, we need room for the ambulance. Make sure your car is not in the way of the ambulance. 8649 Maryland.
432.
432, go ahead.
Just only 52 more cars now.
Okay, 620 asking for more cars at 86 in Maryland. 86 in Maryland, 620 say more cars, please. Okay, guys, how many people we have shot on Maryland? Is it 5 or 4?
620, stand by. 4510, looks like it's
4510 say 6 people shot.
what it looks like.
Okay, guys, will you guys get all the information? I need the conditions.
Slow down, squad, alright? It's a mess over here.
While I was covering a shooting in the Grand Crossing neighborhood, a woman about 70 years old walked up to me and looked me in the eyes and said, "This is not the result my parents fought so hard for." I found her statement to be quite telling.